What a delight to have with us Michael Hyatt. He's authored a book called Platform, Get Noticed in a Noisy World. He is and was the CEO of Thomas Nelson Publishers and best-selling New York Times best-selling author. And this book, I think you're going to find to be a real resource for you, especially if you're looking to get noticed. And so, Michael, what a delight to have you with. Where are we Skyping you in from? It's a beautiful room you're in.
Oh, thanks, Perry. This is my library in Nashville, Tennessee.
Wow, it's gorgeous. Thank you. Nice. Thanks for being with us today. And this book is fascinating. What provoked you to go down this road?
Well, about 10 years ago, I started noticing this really disturbing trend in our publishing company, and that was that authors who had brilliant ideas, compelling proposals, even well-written manuscripts, we were turning them away because they didn't have a platform. They didn't have an audience that they could connect with. And as a publishing company, we just couldn't invest in building that platform for us. So I kind of set out on a quest to figure out how can you build a platform in today's world without spending millions of dollars and using the current internet technologies.
All right, so how would you describe a platform for those who want to get on board what you're talking about here?
Yeah, well, a platform is that thing that you stand on to be seen or to be heard. And in the old days, it used to be just a hill, like the Sermon on the Mount. And then it got a little more complicated in the 20th century. You had to have a television show or a radio show, or somebody had to give you a newspaper column, or maybe you spent millions of dollars on advertising. But everything changed in about 2006 with the advent of social media with Facebook and Twitter. Suddenly, everybody had access to a megaphone, and everybody was networked to everybody else.
So can social media be considered a platform? I mean, obviously at some level.
Yeah, definitely at some level, although I would say that in the book, I really try to distinguish what I call a social media framework, because it's easy to get overwhelmed. So many services out there, and it seems like something new coming online every week. And what I talk about is having a home base. That's the whole third section of the book, which is a place that you own and control in cyberspace, like a blog or a podcast or a video channel, where you can control the message and the branding. Then you use the social media channels as what I call virtual embassies. You don't own them and you don't control them, but you've got a presence and you keep referring people back to your home base.
Platforms, we have it here. Obviously, we got a radio and television show. It provides for a great opportunity. You do it through the print industry. And social media being what it is today. Is that now considered the essential for somebody to launch a business or something that they're doing or a product that they're involved in?
Well, I don't know about if it's the essential, but it's definitely an integral part of the strategy. And it's so much cheaper. I mean, what's the alternative? There's so much noise out there. There's so much confusion out there that it's hard for small businesses or other people to get noticed. But the great thing about social media is that it gives you a way to connect with people that are passionate about the things that you're connected about. And hopefully you're in business or you're giving a message about something you're passionate about. And if you can attract an audience to that, you can communicate it to them more effectively and less expensively than any other media available.
Well, what's interesting, it is really noisy out there now. So I think there's so many voices screaming at us and people trying to figure out how to get heard or how to get noticed. I don't know, as an example, how do you promote yourself in this noise so that you do get noticed? I mean, even here with radio and television, we find out now that marketing the product is entirely different today than it was just a few days or a few years ago.
Yeah, it's totally true. And that's why even in the first part of the book, I talk about starting with wow. You've got to have a remarkable product. David Ogilvy, who was one of the founders of modern advertising, said it best about 40 years ago when he said, great advertising only makes a bad product fail faster. So if you're not creating a great product that's remarkable, that generates word of mouth, marketing's not going to help you. So you really have to start with that message, with the brand, with the business, with the service you're trying to offer, and make sure you've got the wow factor built into it.
It seems like social media has really changed marketing entirely in this country. And how's it affected you as a publisher?
Boy, it's affected us in a ton of ways. For one thing, the old kind of marketing that we used to use just doesn't work anymore. The interruption-based marketing where you're essentially yelling at people, spamming them, hoping that they buy your product. What it takes today is really sharing stories, connecting with customers, and really building what Seth Godin called in his book Tribes, a tribe of people that share your passion and you can activate when you're trying to get something important done, get a product sold, get a business started, whatever it may be.
Now, product on demand is kind of the other thing that's hit us. No longer do you wait, no longer do you have to catch a television show at a certain time. You can dial it up and watch it when you want to. So the whole industry's changed.
Yeah, I actually really love that, but there's less friction between the person's intention and the fulfillment of that. So, impulse buying is really big now, and it's certainly hit the publishing world. It's hitting the video world. It's hitting the radio world in terms of podcasts. So, yeah, people expect it to be now and on demand on their terms when they want it.
All right, now, if you take the big three, you got YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. How would you rate them? How would you prioritize them as a means of developing a platform?
Well, this is really critical for people that are trying to build a platform to understand. It's different in every case. The important thing is to go where your customers are congregating or your prospects are congregating and connect with them on their turf, so to speak. So, for example, at my website at michaelhyatt.com, I love Twitter. That's my first social media of choice. But in terms of driving blog traffic to me, it's about half as effective as Facebook. So even though I don't like Facebook as much, that's just me personally, a personal preference, it's more effective in driving traffic. So I've got to spend time there if I'm going to be effective in getting attention for my blog.
Now, some people are saying, as an example, what's been in the news lately, Facebook, as you know, came out, it went public. It's performed very poorly on the stock market since its launch. So the rumor mill is now, well, it won't be around in the next 5 to 8 years. So why invest in it now? What's the next platform coming at us?
Well, this shows us how crazy our world is. I mean, the IPO is only 2 weeks old.
Right.
And the whole market essentially, tanked during that period. So the market's not performed really well either. But it's going to find its own level. Maybe they overpriced it to begin with. Who knows? But Facebook has 1 billion customers. They're not going away tomorrow. They might in 5 years or 10 years. Who can predict the future? But something else will take its place because all these social networks are tapping into something that's really important, and that is people's need to connect with other people. And social media facilitates that in a way that we've never been able to do before with previous technology.
Now, do you break your research out generationally? I mean, are you looking at generational science as much as you are anything else?
Yeah, I am some. And I think a common misperception there, Perry, is that it's the young people that are on social networks. Surprisingly, the fastest growing segment of Twitter, for example, is people 50 years old and older.
Okay. And so therefore, they're not as computer illiterate as the rumor mill would have them to be.
Well, and it's not that difficult to actually use these social media, so that even if you're not, somebody that can get on a spreadsheet or use a word processor or do some of these more complicated things, you can get on Facebook, read your family's updates, read your friends' updates, and post an occasional status update. So it's not that difficult. Both my parents, by the way, who are almost 80, are on Facebook and Twitter.
Okay. You say something in the book that really strikes a nerve with me, and I want to kind of unpack this a little bit. You say that customer engagement is more important than market research. And first of all, explain that statement.
Well, certainly customer research is important, but the engagement is the important thing at the end of the day. In other words, how connected are people with your brand, with your message, your product, or your service? Do they want to talk about it? Do they want to have conversations about it? And a great example of this is, at least at our local mall here in Nashville, if you go down there on a weekday, when it's totally dead, you go to the Apple store, and it's like a bar on a Saturday night. I mean, everybody's in there. Everybody's talking about their products. It's very busy. So that's the kind of engagement I'm talking about, and the kind that can really inform you as a marketer in terms of what your customers and prospects really want.
Okay, now, so how do you, the difference between emotional engagement and intellectual engagement, so you're not selling something, but actually serving or providing what they want. I mean, those are fine lines in marketing, but yet if you don't go, I've been told you got to go through the heart to get to the head. You can't go through the head to get to the heart. Do you see that to be true?
I think it's a combination of both. I think you definitely have to appeal past the head to the heart. You've got to emotionally engage people. And by the way, this isn't about being manipulative. You know, in a very real sense, the strategy that works today is it's more blessed to give than to receive. I mean, it's a brilliant marketing strategy, but generosity is what's working in the marketplace today. You've got to add more value than you extract.
All right. So, in building a platform, getting back to somebody that's trying to launch themselves or their career, what would be some of the ABCs? I mean, do you go for the platform or do you go for the wow? How do you test what you're doing to make sure you got the wow factor?
Well, again, I think it's you've got to figure out what your customers want, what they expect, and then you've got to ask, how can I deliver even more value so that I exceed their expectations? So I create the wow experience so they want to talk about it, because what you're looking for is an army of unpaid evangelists, essentially, to help you get the word out. For example, when I launched my book platform 2 weeks ago, and it's only 2 weeks old, I asked for people to volunteer to be part of the platform launch team. And I did this on my blog. I had 764 people apply, and they actually had to do a written application why they wanted to be part of it. And we randomly picked 100 people. Those 100 people read the book, were committed to go out and talking about it in their social networks. And as a result of that, in the first week, it got on the New York Times list, the USA Today bestsellers list, and the Wall Street Journal bestsellers list. So it really came back to enlisting the word of mouth of a few really dedicated fans. And that can work for anybody, by the way.
Wow. You write, beware of self-proclaimed social media experts. What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, it's kind of like it used to be when somebody had the term consultant. What that was is kind of a euphemism for somebody that was unemployed.
Yeah.
Well, a social media expert has kind of become the new moniker that people use when they don't have a day job or a regular gig. And so they get out on Facebook and Twitter and they think they've got a few hundred followers. Now they're a social media expert. So one of the things I say in that chapter is make sure that the person who is advising you on your web development or on your social media growth is actually, eating the dog food themselves. There's somebody that's got results in their own experience to validate what they're telling you to do. And in the book, I don't advise people on nothing that I haven't done myself.
All right, let's bring this into Christianity for a moment. How would
Good.
this book help a church?
Well, churches are competing in the marketplace of ideas just like anybody else.
Right.
And they're trying to get people to unplug from TV for a few hours, unplug from the internet for a few hours, stop gaming for a few hours, whatever it is, but to come to a worship service, or maybe it's a small group or something else. And they've got to connect with people. And again, Jesus said, I love this. Jesus said, go therefore and make disciples. He didn't say stay where you are in your comfortable little bubble, but he said you got to get out of that. And that means going into these social spaces where people are naturally congregating and then bringing them back in. And in a church's case, their home base would be the church.
It's been said media is now the mission field in America, and whether it's social media, broadcasting, any other way. So you're dealing with this fast-paced culture, in and out. Attention spans a lot shorter these days. You only have a few seconds to connect emotionally with them. What would you say to us who are in broadcasting, looking at your book here and say, all right, what are you guys doing right or wrong?
Well, I think everything I say in the book, applies to you and anybody that's in the media. And I think particularly as Christians, we always have these two tensions that we're trying to manage between. On the one hand, we want to be absolutely faithful to the message. I don't want anyone tampering with the basic message of the gospel. So that's kind of one pole.
Right.
On the other hand, we have the pressure to be relevant and to get out there and connect with people where they're gathering. So we've got to do that while at the same time not compromising the fidelity of the gospel message. And I think that's true for me. That's true for you in radio, true for people in video, whatever it is, whatever media they're using. They've got to do both of those.
All right, let's come back to checking ourselves. Well, let me ask you this. What do you think the secret is about Apple? Why is that store crowded? They are selling a product, but I've noticed that too. You could walk, I was in Singapore going through the airport there. The airport was late at night, hardly anybody up and down the hall, but that Apple store was crowded. I'm thinking, what's the deal? What's the attraction that they go in there and do what they do?
It's crazy.
It is.
It's like a cult. I don't know how else to explain it. I mean, the closest thing I know to it is Dave Ramsey fans, and Dave's a really good friend of mine, and I totally believe in his message. But people that are excited about Dave are similar to Apple fans. I think both of those, even Harley Davidson enthusiasts, all of these tribes have similar characteristics. One of it is they've identified a passion, and they've aggregated people around that passion, people that share that passion, and they've delivered the wow factor on the product. And Apple is a master of that. And I think one of the things that Steve Jobs did that was so fascinating and so instructive for us that are those of us who are trying to create messages and connect with customers, he created products that he himself wanted to use. And I meet so many people in sales today who don't really buy what they're trying to sell. They're not that enthusiastic. I mean, they kind of gin it up when they have to sell, but they're not users of their product. Steve Jobs designed a phone, for example, that he wanted to use, and that made all the difference.
All right, that's good advice. All right, so what do you say to somebody that's right in this embryonic stage, their home base, they're sitting at home on a computer, they got some kind of a product they got going. Where would you tell them to start in order to expand?
Man, I would tell them a couple of things, Perry. One is start. I mean, get out there. The time is now. When I first started blogging was in 2004. For the first 4 years, I couldn't attract more than 1,000 readers a month. In fact, the first year was like 100 readers a month, but I got up in 4 years to 1,000 readers a month. In the fifth year, I went to 20,000 readers a month. Last month, I had 300,000 unique visitors to my blog a month. So it's grown exponentially. But the point is, don't give up in the end. Most people, or don't give up in the beginning, excuse me. Most people give up right before it gets interesting. So you've got to start and you've got to stay with it. Another thing I would say too is that don't feel like you've got to figure it all out from A to Z when you start. For me at least, it's always the next step that's clear, but not much beyond that. The important thing is to be faithful, get started. You'll figure it out as you go.
All right, I want to come back to the wow factor because I know you spend a lot of time on it. Again, for those just joining us, describe the wow factor because that's it. I mean, that is it. If the wow isn't there, I mean, I was in New York City. There's the Apple store downstairs. You go through the glass elevator and go down, and there's the wow. You kind of go, wow, what's going on here?
Yeah, the wow factor is that gap that exists between what your customers expect and what they experience. And I'll tell you a story for me that was a wow factor or a wow experience was I went to Scotland with my wife and my youngest daughter maybe about 5 years ago. We rented a car in Edinburgh and we decided we were going to drive through the Western Highlands and we were going to go to the island of Skye. And when we got to the capital of Skye, a name I can't pronounce, but when we got to the capital of Skye, I mean, when we crested kind of that little hill and saw the bay, our jaws dropped to the floor of the car because it was such a wow experience, because it exceeded our expectations. Well, in order to create wow with a product, a service, even a church with a message or with an experience for the people that are members or the people that are visiting, you've got to articulate first what people expect, and then you've got to exceed that. And I mean, being deliberate. I encourage people to write this down. Just another quick story. When I became the CEO of Thomas Nelson, I knew that one of the most important ways to connect with people that were visiting our company was the lobby. And our lobby was like a lot of lobbies in corporations. It was a little bit dark and dreary. And we had a receptionist that saw her job primarily as protecting anyone from getting into the building. Yeah. And there were some outdated magazines and all of that. And I immediately changed her title. And I said, you are from now on the director of first impressions. It's critical that people have a positive first impression if they're going to understand our company and if they're going to connect with us and have a wow experience. We redecorated the lobby. We made it a fabulous experience because we wanted to engineer a wow when they first showed up.
Have you read all the E-Myth books?
I have. I love the E-Myth books. Michael Gerber is a guy that I recommend and read faithfully.
Oh, I get a lot out of those. What about branding? How do you separate the wow and branding, or how do you maybe make them synonymous?
Well, it's interesting that you bring those two up because they definitely are related. Essentially how I look at a brand is that it's your reputation. It's your reputation for delivering on your promise. And we live in a world where so few people take their word seriously. I mean, even Christians, and I mean, I hate to say this because I primarily relate to Christians. I've worked with Christians my entire professional career. But so many people are cavalier about their word. They make a promise and then they don't fulfill it, and they don't think it's that big a deal. It's a huge deal, not just in terms of integrity, but in terms of branding. If your customers can't count on you to deliver what you say you're going to deliver time after time after time, you develop a brand, all right, but it's a negative brand. Like even going to a restaurant. Maybe one time you have a great experience, the food's fabulous, the service is great, and so you talk about it. And then you go back and maybe it's a completely different experience and it confuses you. And so now the brand has gotten muddled in your mind because the company is not delivering on its brand promise. So again, it's delivering that wow experience again and again, never taking your customers for granted, and just being serious about delivering wow. And the bar keeps getting raised.
You certainly encourage people to think bigger, and you say, no, bigger than that.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's really easy to kind of just set out on a course without being specific about what it is you want to accomplish. I read a book years ago with my wife and my daughters on a vacation called Write It Down, Make It Happen. And the author's premise was that when we write something down and when we think big, we set something in motion. Now, I don't subscribe to the theory that if you just write it down or, set this intention loose in the universe, that suddenly it's going to all happen. There has to be a lot of doing, a lot of execution to make it happen. But it begins by dreaming, by getting a clear vision. I'll tell you another quick story. On December the 16th of this last year, I did what I do every year, which was to write down my top 10 goals for 2012. And my very first goal for this year was to get my new book platform on the New York Times bestsellers list by May the 30th. And it happened on that exact day. Now, I don't want to pretend that everything I write down comes to pass or comes to pass on the same day that I hope it will. But I'm telling you that by writing it down, it sets some things in motion. I began to think about the project differently. I began to act differently. I began to recruit people that could help me get to that goal. And thankfully it happened.
Wow. Hey, thanks. I'm sorry we had some technical glitches, but nonetheless, a fascinating resource. It's called Platform Get Noticed in a Noisy World by Michael Hyatt. Michael, thank you. Boy, this is fascinating. When you get done, I think your next thing is go into the seminar stage for a little while and come consult businesses like us.
Thanks, Perry. I appreciate you having me on.
All right, God bless you.